Welcome, infinite beings. Welcome back to the Infinite Me, where every day we're having conversations talking about living in the moment and what looks like living from that space of infinite consciousness. And so I am Mandy, and over there is Nat. And we are sisters, yes. So we have conversations each day in the moment. We pull a topic to talk about, which we'll do in a moment. Yesterday's conversation, we talked about positive thinking and the whole sort of movement, I guess, around only thinking positive and how that's actually not scientifically possible anyway, according to the law of physics, but actually how it can even make you go the other way and cause depression or, a lot of rage inside sometimes because you're not actually expressing the negative stuff that moves through as well. So we talked all about that and addressing how you got to do both sides to bring it back into balance and to be in that neutral space. So check out that one because it's a interesting concept that we can get stuck in, definitely, and only trying to think positive and not attract negative energy, supposedly. So
yeah.
Yes. So each day we talk about a topic that we pull from our little infinite lucky dip bag. So we've just thrown in topics that we've come up with over the last few weeks, something that's either triggered us or we've read something or a question that somebody has asked us and we've popped it in the bag and we pull out one in the moment. And we're going to have a little change up today. We thought we're going to try and put a time limit on our conversations because we do have a tendency to keep chatting and chatting, which is, it's all good too. Sometimes they're shorter, sometimes longer. But we thought we're going to put a time limit of 25 minutes on these chats so that we can make it a little bit more focused, I guess, the conversation. So we'll see how we go up against the timer. Nat's going to put a timer on us today.
How we go. Not sure how we're going to go, but
all right. Oh, we can start the time. Are you going to start the timer now, or you?
You pull the thing.
Okay. First. All right. We're going to pull a little thing from our little bag.
Hopefully by then the cat will get out of the kitty litter, and I'll stop having to listen to that.
All right. Another. Oh, there's two here. We'll have to choose one without looking at what they are.
The tomato timer. Yes, the pomodoro. We are pomodoro. We haven't used pomodoro sessions before. 25 minutes on the clock. Tell you what, they get you wriggling along, getting work done. That's for sure. So yes, we are using the pomodoro. That's quite funny.
All right. So we've got. Interesting one. Got suicide. Feelings of suicide are death of the ego. That's the note we wrote on our little piece of paper when we wrote this at the time. So
okay. Well, this will be a quick version. All right.
All right.
25 minutes. Starting now. Okay. Cool. So the idea of suicide, this has come up for quite a number of years, I think. Jodie and I have talked about this over many years, and I wanted to talk about it because it's a little bit of a different take on things. And that is oftentimes in consciousness work, when you're going through, you do go through the dark night of the soul, and you can go down to very, very low levels. And I'm sure anybody that's been on the consciousness journey long enough will have experienced this. And it sort of dawned on me probably quite a few years ago now that it really wasn't, and I've been through this as well many, many years ago when I was living in Sydney. And everything seemed to be falling apart, and I didn't seem to have any money, and just everything that I thought my life was going to look like didn't look anything like that. In fact, if anything, it looked like the opposite of that. And I really reached that stage of just complete, almost hopelessness, which is probably about the lowest anyone can ever get when there's not even an ounce of hope left.
Yes.
And I really was contemplating how I was going to do it. I was just like, I was living, funnily enough, on Sydney Harbour, in a beautiful place. And I was looking at the water, and I was looking at the anchor ropes, and I was like, I could just go and tie off on an anchor rope and just lay there until it all ended. So it was sort of really interesting to go through this process, and it dawned on me that it really wasn't, I actually didn't have a desire to die. What was happening was I was having an ego side. So there was a part of me that was dying, but it wasn't me that wanted to die. Even that sort of human sense of survival mechanism kicking in type thing, which we all have so strongly, which overrides just about everything.
Yes.
But that it was sort of like I'd been misinterpreting it a little bit. So it was sort of seemed like from an ego story point of view that I wanted to just die and end it all because it was just becoming all too much. And I couldn't see a way out. That's really what kept coming to me all the time, is I can't see a way out of this. And I think that's pretty common from what I've heard in the whole suicidal thought process. But what it was, was that sort of sense of part of me was dying. So when I really woke up and realized that, oh, actually, I don't want to die. There's a process going on right now, and I'm letting go of an old identity. So it feels like that part of you is actually dying, that identity that you've had before, and you're going to obviously rise to a new identity. So it was just really interesting take on, I thought, on suicide. And I've spoken to Jodie since then about it, because she has been through it a couple of years later. When we were in St. Lucia, she was really feeling that real desire of, what's the point? I can't see a way out. Like that. And so we talked about this. We talked about the whole idea of ego-cide. And suicide is in her family. So she started to wonder whether it was hereditary. And so she started to go down that line. And I was like, no, I actually don't think you do want to die. I think there's actually just a part of you that's going through that process right now.
Yes.
So that's what I want to talk about. I'm not saying that that's the case for everybody. I guess I can only talk from people on the consciousness path. People that may not be on that path, there might be other thought processes that go on and stuff. But certainly people on the consciousness path, this might be what's going on.
Yes.
Possibly.
Yep. Yeah, I would say that feels true to me. Like, in terms of, I definitely have had a couple of moments of different time points, if you like. It seems to last more than a moment, but I mean, a couple of different instances, if you like, of having that feeling as well. So I definitely have gone through that space too, of feeling like in such a depressed, low state that and everything on the outside feels like it's not working. Even though your best efforts, like you're on the consciousness path and you think, I'm doing the work and I'm moving through the stories, and it still feels like things are falling apart, which is what has to happen anyway. Like, in the scheme of things, like, the whole point of going on that consciousness journey is for those stories to fall away. But it feels really, really painful to the ego to have all that stuff fall away, the stuff that isn't kind of true or built on a true foundation, if you like. It's built on a very limited belief structure. So that's what I felt like in that space too. It just felt like everything wasn't kind of working, couldn't see a way out as well. So, but I would definitely say that's what it was, as well as that death of the ego, because there was definitely a part of me that had all these ideas and things I actually wanted to bring into the world, which was some of where that frustration was coming from, because I couldn't see how to do all those things too. So it almost felt like it was too big, too hard. Couldn't work out how to do it. Circumstances around me were showing me that I was the complete opposite of these ideas. Like, I felt like I was so small and so limited and didn't have the resources and felt quite isolated. At the time, I was actually quite isolated with where we were living. And I was on my own a lot of the time during the week, because my husband was working away from home, and so he was gone for 2 or 3 days at a time, and so I would literally go 2 or 3 days, 4 days sometimes, without actually seeing another person. And I'd take the dogs for a walk and I wouldn't see anyone, because we lived in a country area. So I didn't quite realize at the time how I actually enjoyed it, but then it actually became an isolation sort of thing. And I actually, the ego kind of really got a hold of that and turned it into a story of, I didn't want to be around people. And but then it sort of spiraled down, I think, from there too. So that's definitely when one of those instances came up for me. But I would definitely say that it was part of the ego story dying, because there was definitely a part within me that wanted to do all these big ideas and these inspiration that was moving through me. So I'm just sort of wondering, even in the case of actual suicide, say people that aren't on a consciousness journey, like you said, I can't, it's only a guess at perhaps what's happening for those people. I wouldn't really know. You're not in their body or in their mind to know what's happening. But I actually just wonder if it's the ego has taken over so much, and you're so stuck in a story that you feel so separate to everything, that everything feels so far away. Because that's what you do feel like in that space. You feel like the universe definitely does not have my back. I feel like I am completely separate to the world. Nobody can help me. Not even God can help me, in this space. Like, I'm just here on my own, this little person, don't know what to do. I'm just wondering if people that do feel in that suicidal space, if that's kind of the feeling that you're actually still going through, and maybe there isn't that sense of life still flowing within you, and so you don't actually see any point. Whereas maybe perhaps if you're on a consciousness journey, you do sort of have enough tools and awareness, if you like, under your belt, that there's still this little thread that lies underneath it all that you don't actually follow through with the thought, because you have enough awareness, you've built enough space into your, like, all this thing about creating inner space that we've talked about. Like, even though you might get into a really dark place, you've created enough inner space and enough awareness that you don't actually follow through, because there's part of you that knows that's not actually the truth. Like, it's not, you don't actually want to kill yourself, as you said. You do want to stay alive.
In some ways, I guess you've created a separation between yourself and the ego as well. So if you're not so much on the consciousness journey and you're not aware, you're actually in the story, and you're not aware that there's a position outside of the story where you could actually observe the story, and you're just a participant in the story. So then you do get caught in that, and it's very easy to go down that line. Whereas somebody on the consciousness journey, hopefully there is that sense of, I'm not my ego, I'm not the story right now. So I think that's what happened for me, is like, and I don't think I even was aware of this terminology back then. I think there was just a part of me at some point just tweaked and went, oh, hang on, it's not me that wants to do that. I don't actually want to do that. Somehow or another that sort of came to me, and I was like, and then suddenly there was that separation. I was like, oh, okay, this, I can see what's happening now. Like, it's part of me that's dying. It's just a part of the identity that I've had for all these years. And that's going through a death. So, but it is interesting, like, it's almost like to get to that stage, everything does need to fall apart. So maybe it is about recognizing the fact that what used to work doesn't work anymore. And things are actually going to be collapsing around you. It's going to look the exact opposite to what you would hope it would look like, and what you thought it might look like, at that age or in that time frame. But it almost needs to do that, as you say, like, to totally collapse on itself, to break that illusion in the first place and break that identity open. Otherwise we're just hanging on to it so tightly that it's holding everything in place, type thing. So it has to collapse in itself. So if you're not going to do that, then the infinite self will make sure it does do that in reality, that the storyline breaks apart. And then you do get to that suicidal place of like, okay, I just can't do this anymore. And to me, that I can't do this anymore really is that place of surrender, because you just realize you haven't got any answers anymore. It's just like,
you're willing to give up the control, like, of trying to work it out, because that's essentially what we are doing. Where the ego is trying to control it all and work it out, and from that limited
and have everything,
space,
all the ducks lined up, sort of thing. My life is working. I've got it in a little box. I know what works. Now suddenly that's not working anymore. I do the same thing and it's not working. It's not having the same outcome as it used to have. And I know we've all experienced that on the consciousness journey, where something worked for a period of time, doesn't work anymore. It's like, oh crap, what's happening now? I don't know what's going on. And so the ego panics, because I have to come up with a new strategy now. But when you run out of strategies and you run out of answers, and because the ego is the only thing that ever asks questions and looks for an answer, the infinite self has no questions and already knows everything. So there is no questions at all. So, but you run out of answers for everything, and it's sort of like, that does give you that sense of hopelessness, because there's nothing left. There's just space. But funnily enough, that's the infinite. The space that we get to with nothing left, the hopelessness space, actually is the doorway to the infinite. So it's such a nice, when you can reframe it, perhaps, it can be such a nice invitation, that space, to walk through that door finally and go, okay, I surrender now. Like, I'm surrendering this part of myself that it's been me for all these years. I'm now giving that up, and I'm willing to do that, to walk through the door of the infinite and see what's next, see what unfolds from there.
And I think that hopelessness space that you're talking about, that nothingness space, it's only the ego that's perceiving that as the nothingness or the hopelessness too, because it is the death of the ego at that point. That does feel like it's a death to the ego when it can't see anything in that infinite space, because it can't exist in that formless space too. So that's why it feels like it's hopeless, because there is no other strategy for the ego at that point in time. So that's the actual truth of what is actually going on for the ego. That's why it, so it is a true feeling for the ego to be feeling that. But yeah, as you said, like, I think if we're built in enough space, we have that awareness, that glimmer of awareness, or standing outside of yourself sometimes and watching, observing yourself, if you like that you're not the ego, and you're not the body, and you're not the little human that's struggling with that thing. There's just this little sense of, no, something bigger is happening here, and I'm not actually in control of that. And if we can sort of give in to that feeling, like you said, that surrender, it's almost got to bring you to your knees sometimes, because we haven't been willing to give up control beyond that point, sometimes up to that point. And I can definitely say that for the point that I reached at that point in time, I was definitely trying to figure it all out myself. Even though I was on the consciousness journey and doing different spiritual things, I definitely wasn't making it a priority. It was definitely a lot of intellectualizing going on with the spiritual stuff. It wasn't so much a living it everyday space. So I definitely was, I had this persona, I guess, of having it all kind of figured out, but definitely on the inside was trying to control it all from the ego space. So I could see 100% what was happening at that point in time, that everything did have to kind of fall apart on the outside, because it was coming from purely from an ego limited perspective, and built on a whole bunch of limiting beliefs and fears and avoiding, behavior and all these different things that were kind of going on, and not wanting to look at actually what was happening. Trying to put your head in the sand and pretend it's all okay, but scurrying, dying on the inside almost. So that's what it feels like. So, and it's essentially what was happening, as we just said, like, it was the ego that's actually dying.
Well, it's only the dark times that we tend to stop and ask ourselves the hard questions. When everything's flowing, it's sort of like, I'm on top of the world, this is happening, that's happening. You don't question anything. You don't look at anything else, and rightly so. So that's why the dark times, like we were talking all day yesterday, all about positive thinking. That's why the dark times are so vital to this journey. It's the only time we stop and we take stock and we ask those questions about what's hidden, what's in the shadows still that I haven't addressed, what's not feeling 100% aligned with who I am. And having the chance to address that, having that downtime. Like, the universe operates in ebb and flow for everything. You'll find this in your finances. Sometimes you've got tons of money, other times it feels like you've got virtually none. And funnily enough, you might have the same amount sitting in the bank account, but your perception of it and your attitude towards it is, oh, I feel really abundant right now. Oh, actually, I feel really limited right now. I don't have any. I don't have any spare. So it's sort of like, and there's nothing actually happening in reality. It's just all your ebbing and flowing perception of things. So of course we're going to go up and down in our mood, in our perceptions, in our feelings about things. Sometimes we will feel really up and on, and things are happening and stuff, and just for no reason, it's going to feel like really sludgy and dragging time, and things are not getting done. And oftentimes we attribute it to things like Mercury retrograde and all this sort of stuff. We start looking to the stars oftentimes for the answers, and it's like, maybe there is no answer there. Maybe it is just the natural ebb and flow of life. And we have to get used to those ebb and flows and not judge either one, like not feel really up and putting ourselves on a pedestal when we're feeling really up, and not putting ourselves therefore in the pit when things are not flowing as quickly as we think they should. And it does feel a bit sludgier. We're just in the ebb of things, and it is a time to take stock. And I guess that's why we have seasons even. The summers and winters come for a reason. And winter is that hibernation. You don't get it so much where you do. where you are, you'd get it a little bit more.
Yeah, it's
Those
distinct
darker days
feeling.
and it's cold and stuff. When you get closer to the equator, you don't get that so much. So I feel like people miss out on that. And funnily enough, when we do our house sitting, we actually seek seasons. We will go hot to cold because we're moving all over the place all the time. We can only put up with so much hot before we, like right now, we've had like 6 or 8 months of stinking hot weather. And it's like, no, we are really dying for the winter now. Like we're going to Canada and Edinburgh for the winter. So it'll be really dark days, short days. That's that hibernation that we're craving now. It's just like, it's time to come back inside again now and take stock again of everything. So honoring that is really, really important. I just found this because I just thought of it. That vulnerability TED talk by Brené Brown. No doubt you've probably seen it. Because it's had like 11 million views or something. And it's an amazing, amazing talk about vulnerability and how we often run from vulnerability. But it's one of the most important things that we can embrace. And I feel like the whole ego side is actually tied up with this. And perhaps just we could all watch it again, even though we have watched it before. It's always really nice to revisit this message again because I think it's such an important one for accessing the infinite. It's only the vulnerability and the unknown space that we can actually access the true infinite.
Yes.
We have to be willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah. And I think the ego avoids that space because it feels like, well, I think there's a perception that if you're vulnerable, you don't have control, like you feel weak, somebody could attack you, you've opened yourself up, you're open to misinterpretation or whatever. Like I think the ego sort of judges that as not a position you want to put yourself in. Like, so it avoids it like the plague, but it's actually the door, to the infinite space, as you just mentioned. So definitely a very powerful talk. Everything that Brené Brown talks about is very
amazing,
worthwhile watching. She talks a lot about vulnerability and shame and all those very deep topics that we don't often address, but they're usually at the root cause of a lot of our stories, if you like.
And I think shame is a big one, actually. It's if you look at the scale of emotions, I can't remember the person that came up with that. If Jodie's watching, do you remember?
Yes, it's on the tip of my tongue.
And shame is the lowest. So oftentimes when people are feeling that suicidal feeling, there is a lot of shame going on.
Yes. I just heard something today actually about shame as a quite a good definition, if you like, around, because guilt can often be like a precursor to shame, like shame is underneath it. And we're saying like shame is basically, Brené might, have a slightly different definition, but this energy reader I was listening to today, Lee Harris, was saying that shame is trying to live our life through like a predetermined sort of set of beliefs and rules, like societies, and we're trying to fit ourselves into that. And because we don't fit into it, or we're trying to and it's not working for us, we feel really guilty, and therefore we feel shame because we can't make it work, sort of thing. And I probably sort of watched up exactly how he said it, but it kind of really landed today when I
makes sense, though.
Heard that. It's like, because that's what it is. Like we're trying to live this predetermined set of things that don't even fit. So maybe it's what our parents told us, growing up, we just felt completely different, but we still trying to fit ourselves. So even that whole thing around hard work that we've talked about in a previous talk around that guilt, because that's where this question came from that somebody was asking, actually, was around guilt, around being self-employed and not knowing if you're doing a good job or not, like, or not knowing if you're working hard enough or you're not working hard enough, and feeling guilty about it. And it's just like, well, what are you measuring it against? Like you're measuring it against some kind of predetermined rule that you think you're meant to be fitting into, and when you're not fitting into it, you do feel ashamed, like you're not meeting the grade, or you're not, so that's where it does feel true. That's where the shame part comes from, but it's a very deep emotion, definitely.
Which is probably why I think Jodie reminded of both of us actually just recently, where people were saying that they'd rather have recognition from a boss than a pay rise. And maybe it comes into that guilt and shame type thing, is like, am I actually doing a good job? I need some feedback. Otherwise I feel really guilty, and I'm sitting here like cowering, going, oh my God, am I actually doing this right? God, Jodie's like going crazy here. about 13 years ago, I heard an ex-nun say that it's not suicide that's being felt, it's ego-cide. She went on to say, we all experience so many deaths. Yeah.
Yep. Very true.
Surrender is a great word. The fight sometimes to get to surrendering is like 12 rounds of boxing ring.
Yep. Yeah, that's the ego just doesn't want to give up. So, yep.
The ego will either avoid vulnerability or want to play on it. So it's so clever in finding some sort of victim story to replay it over and over again and convince you it's a form of vulnerability. It's true.
Yes.
And there you go. Power versus force. There you go. That's where it came from. It was the book Power versus Force.
Yeah.
Shame is the lowest vibration. Yeah.
There's like a scale of consciousness and emotions and where they sit on the vibrational scale. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it is interesting to look at that as an emotion that drives the sense of ego side. And what you say is like you get to a point, and maybe this is the ego side part, where you just nothing is working anymore because you don't fit into what has been. Reality is changing itself because consciousness is changing, and if reality is just reflecting where consciousness is at, reality looks like it's changing all the time as well. So what used to work in your reality doesn't work anymore. So suddenly you have to come up with, pull back and go, okay, something's not right here now, and reassess everything. So that is that ego side is part of you does need to actually collapse that. And particularly if you've been trying to live somebody else's reality, somebody else's set of rules, then you'll reach a stage in your consciousness where that just does not work anymore.
Everything's trying to bring us back into alignment and awakening us to the infinite space. So as we said, everything's happening for us. There's never anything that's not happening for us, even supposedly, wanting to, perhaps kill ourselves. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Christine said, so Christine might be our friend, said in the watch party, research has shown that something like 75% leave or stay in a job because of recognition and not money. Wowza.
That's high.
It's amazing, isn't it? How much we need it.
I think our timer would be going to go off in a minute.
We're at 40 seconds. What else do you? What's the wrap up, man?
I don't know. I think for me, it just feels true what you're saying, that to me, it does definitely feel like the suicide feelings on the awakening path feels like the death of the ego, for sure. For me, I would say 100% that feels true for me. So the old stories falling away so that the actual true foundation can start to build from the true foundation of knowing that you're the infinite consciousness that's moving it all. So you want it to happen at the end of the day, like your soul wants that expansion to happen. So
there is no mistakes. Your soul actually wants you at that point.
Yeah, we asked to wake up, so that's part of it. Yep.
I don't know if anyone ever heard that.
I didn't hear it, no. That's just dancing.
I turned it right down.
You was going to have some funny music at the end, but we can't
I have to turn it up tomorrow because otherwise you won't hear it. Oh, hang on. Maybe I could play it again. Yeah. Let me play it again. So we look like we're finished.
Still can't hear it.
Oh, serious? Oh, it must be on my computer. So now I look like a total idiot because I've danced twice and no one heard anything. That's crazy.
Let us know in the comments how the topic today landed for you. Like, have you had those feelings yourself on the awakening journey? Or you might not have even, sometimes that is actually the catalyst for the awakening journey. You actually reach a dark night of the soul. And maybe that is your actual beginning stages to kind of questioning there has to be something else to life, and you start searching for some answers outside of the ego space that you've been living in too. So let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big topic. I understand.
Yep.
But yeah, if you feel to share any experiences you've had, I really feel that this is a topic with your sharing could actually help other people. So I know there's a big movement around the suicide thing right now. Maybe this is a new way of looking at it, and we could bring this forward. If you really feel it, or the truth of what we're saying, then perhaps this is a new word that we could spread to everybody, not just those on the consciousness journey, because I feel that people probably just aren't aware of what's going on in the process of suicide. I'm not saying this applies to everybody, but I would hazard a guess that there's a number of people that could be helped by this sort of message instead.
Yeah.
Than what's possibly out there at the moment.
Yes.
Very cool. All right. That's it. We did
Thanks
it.
for joining us.
25 minutes. That's good. I think it keeps us on point a bit more. So
yeah,
I'll try that again tomorrow.
Yes.
Very cool. All right.
Right.
Until
Thanks.
tomorrow.
Okay. Bye.
All righty. Stay infinite.